the phrase convicted felon, which would then be an accurate moniker, as absurd as this case is, that is an accurate description, an honest description of Donald Trump. That is a problem.
This is a weak case. And was the defense able to prove that clearly enough? No one's talking about Stormy Daniels right now. And that's one of the things that the prosecution really tried to hammer down for such a long time. It really came down to the crux of Michael Cohen. And is he a liar or not?
The jury is taking this seriously. And you're right in terms of the politics, because I think they're the only 12 people in America who are taking this seriously. If the conviction comes in, no one will be surprised. All they care about is one conviction so that they can now refer to Donald Trump as a convicted felon. That's how he'll get out of doing the debate at the end of June, because he'll say, oh, well, things have changed now. I'm not going to dignify my office with a debate against a man who is a convicted felon.
All right, guys, a lot going on heading into this weekend. 53 pages of jury instructions given to the jury, and the judge today rereading parts of it. The jury, well, I don't know. I can't tell. Is this a good sign, a bad sign? Panel's here. We're going to break it all down. Plus, this De Niro thing, I mean, what a mistake the Biden campaign made by setting Robert De Niro up and going on an unhinged yelling match with some of these people. I think they did a lot of harm. And then Sam Alito, the justice, he is saying, no way, to Senator Dick Durbin, I'm not recusing myself from any cases. My wife flew a flag. I want to ask the panel, is that him blaming his wife or just explaining the situation? We're going to find out. But I mentioned those 53 pages of jury instructions. You know what else is complicated? Your taxes. And if you owe back taxes, I don't care whether it's a $10 or $10 million, you don't want to talk to the IRS until you have representation. I mean, the Democrats took all that additional government spending, billions of dollars, and added tens of thousands of new IRS agents. They have sent out 5 million pay-up letters. You know what that means? We're coming after you. And the last thing you want to do is answer the door or the phone when the IRS is there, because they're not going to back down. You need solid representation. And the folks at Tax Network USA, they know what they're doing. They've recovered billions for their clients. So whether you owe 10,000, 10 million, who cares? Do not talk to them without talking to the folks at Tax Network USA first and foremost. Call 1-800-245-6000. Tell them I sent you, or go to tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. All right, let's get into it with the panel. Lyndsey Keith, my former colleague at Newsmax, is now at the new Merritt Street News. Steve Cortes, the founder of the League of American Workers. He's got a brand new documentary out. I'll talk to you about that. And then Larry O'Connor, one of my mentees and the host of O'Connor and Company on WMAL here in our nation's capital. Let's bring him in. All right, gang, a lot to break down today. I want to start, congratulations to Steve. You've got on your, I still call it Twitter, so I'm not buying into the kid. It's Twitter to me. It'll always be Twitter. Great new documentary on the border.
Patriots, I'm coming to you from a crime scene, the U.S.-Mexico border, which is in fact one of the most dangerous and chaotic places, not just in the United States, but in the entire world.
It was funny. I don't want to name drop, but I was on C-SPAN this morning, and I was asked about the border, and I said that this is the biggest issue out there. Right. And you do a phenomenal job of breaking down the threat that we face and the challenges that some of these folks, the sheriffs and others, are on there. Tell me just quickly, what's the deal with it, and how can people see it? Obviously, I've seen it, but.
Yes. Well, and thank you, Sean. And speaking of quickly, it is a short documentary, so it's not a big commitment of time, but I think we pack a lot of compelling information there. I went physically to the border, which is something that our supposed commander-in-chief has yet to do, despite the fact that that's the location of the crime scene that he has created, the crisis, the existential crisis, I argue, to this country. We interview people on the ground there, show the dire ramifications economically, criminally, and otherwise for this country because of the open border, and it's a call to action. We want people to not just complain, not just be angry, but to make sure they are registered to vote and make sure they vote early in their elections to make sure we fix this border. So thank you. Please go to my X page, X Twitter, at Cortes Steve, Cortes with an S. That's where it is right now. It'll be on other social media going forward, but for the debut, it's a Twitter debut.
Yeah, it's worth, I think it's 17 minutes and change, folks. It's worth listening. Steve's got some sheriffs on there. I think it just highlights how important this is and the challenges that these guys face on a daily basis. And there's one rancher in particular that just, again, the stories make it come clear if you're not down there on the border. I've got Carrie Lake on, by the way, tomorrow to talk about this and what challenges they face in Arizona specifically. But anyway, go check it out. I want to go around the horn real quick and just full disclosure. Obviously, the jury's still out. Well, we're talking about this right now. But Lyndsey, where do you think this court case ends up that Trump is facing up there in New York?
Oh, wow. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, Sean.
No. But I mean, there's these two competing interests. I've got diehard. Mike Davis is on the show. He says, I've lost faith in the Manhattan jury, and I think they're going to convict him. I've had Alan Dershowitz. I mean, everybody's got some angle. I hold out hope that 2-3 people recognize this and it's a hung jury.
You know, I think everyone's reading into what they asked for yesterday. I'm glad that they're taking it seriously. Many people thought that they would deliberate so quickly. I'm glad they're taking at least more than one day to deliberate and try to do their part ultimately. But I don't think they're going to convict him. And if they do, I think it'll probably be a felony. I think it comes down to Judge Merchan, what ultimately he gives, hands down, to Trump at the end of the day. I would be shocked. I mean, he's said before on the stand, I don't want to give you jail time. And so I think there would have to be a full conviction for him to do that. But at the end of the day, you know, the fact that they're taking this seriously, that they wanted Cohen's testimony or part of it. I mean, this is what the defense asked. Listen to this guy calling Cohen, you know, the MVP of liars. So I don't think we're going to see a full conviction, maybe on some counts. But at the end of the day, I would be shocked if they convict him on every count.
Oh, the thing is, all 34 are pretty close. I mean, it's just instances. It's this many. Right. Each check is. So, I mean, my point is, I get it. There may be a way that they assuage each other by saying, hey, let's find him guilty. But I don't. Again, I'm not enough of an expert to understand how you split the baby and say, okay, on these particular checks, the way that they were accounted for, I get it. Maybe that's what they look for as the out, or, you know, but Larry, I politically, I got to believe that this benefits Trump because it really has gone over the top. And when you have people on CNN, Fareed Zakaria, Michael Smerconish, even Ellie Honig, their acclaimed legal scholar, all casting doubt on the merits of this case, I got to hold out hope that at least one person, for goodness sake, but at least I think 3 or 4 say, you know what, God, I may not like him, but that's not what we're supposed to do here.
Yeah, I agree. I think CNN, though, I thought their noted legal scholar was Jeffrey Toobin, though. So has there been a change of status there? I'm trying to keep up. I think Lyndsey's right. I think that the jury is, in fact, taking this seriously.
So many opportunities for puns there, but I'm going to let it slide.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I know next time you're on cable access,
we don't have to keep it up.
Yes. Lyndsey's right. The jury is taking this seriously. And you're right in terms of the politics, because I think they're the only 12 people in America who are taking this seriously. If the conviction comes in, no one will be surprised. In fact, the Biden administration has already politicized this from the beginning, as has their campaign. All they care about is one conviction so that they can now refer to Donald Trump as a convicted felon. And by the way, that's how he'll get out of doing the debate at the end of June, because they'll say, oh, well, things have changed now. I'm not going to dignify my office with a debate against a man who is a convicted felon. If there is a hung jury at best, it will be a monumental victory for Donald Trump. But either way, in terms of politics, it hasn't moved the needle at all. As you said, it's probably helped Donald Trump here, Steve, which is hilarious, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, Sean, let me quote Jesse Jackson, believe it or not, keep hope alive, right? And keep hope alive because the jury continues to deliberate. And I do agree, the longer they deliberate, the higher the odds of a hung jury. I think an acquittal's out of the question. That is not happening given a New York jury pool. Okay, 0% chance of that. So in my view, but a hung jury, if they keep deliberating into tomorrow, I think the odds rise dramatically that we could possibly get there. And I agree with Larry, that would be a massive win for President Trump. But look, in all likelihood, if I were forced to bet, I would bet on conviction, and mainly not just because of the jury pool, but because of the absurd, just patently absurd jury instructions of Judge Merchan. And one thing I will tell you, because I've done a lot of battleground polling in recent months, and let me give you the most recent that I did in the state of Georgia. In Georgia, we have Trump up double digits. Okay, he's at 10% commanding lead in a state that he lost last time of Georgia. But the biggest risk we see within the polling, because I don't want to be Pollyanna, just say everything's fine. Within my polling, we asked about the legitimacy of these cases against Trump, and we asked it in a very objective way, not push polling. And it broke down almost exactly along party lines, unfortunately. Democrats think that the prosecutions are valid. Republicans think they aren't. And independents slightly break against Trump. So I'm not one of these people who say that it has no risk. I do believe if he gets convicted, the phrase convicted felon, which would then be an accurate moniker, as absurd as this case is, that is an accurate description, an honest description of Donald Trump. That is a problem. Now, I don't think it's a death knell. It doesn't mean Joe Biden wins. Absolutely not. But I'm saying it is a problem. It is a hurdle to be overcome if that in fact happens.
I agree with you. Just the idea of saying to somebody, you're going to vote for a convicted felon.
Right.
And even because the time it takes to appeal won't allow it to be adjudicated before the November election. So I agree with you. I think that moniker sticks, and enough people, I keep telling people, to your point about Georgia or Pennsylvania or Michigan, we're talking about thousands of people over a handful of states. So It doesn't take, you're not trying to move a mountain. You're literally trying to move a molehill. I mean, to use the example, but I think, let me ask you this. Yesterday, I thought it was interesting. Trump went out and said Mother Teresa herself couldn't beat these charges. Let me just play it real quick.
These charges are rigged. The whole thing is rigged. The whole country's a mess between the borders and fake elections, and you have a trial like this where the judge is so conflicted he can't breathe. He's got to do his job, and it's not for me, that I can tell you. It's a disgrace, and I mean that. Mother Teresa could not beat those charges, but we'll see. We'll see how we do. It's a very disgraceful situation.
The question I have for you is, Lyndsey, do you think he set the expectation right? He so often, I think, sometimes undermines the expectation, right? He sets, you think about it with the debates, he says, Joe Biden's going to get killed. And it's like, okay, now all he has to do is show up. On this, I thought he did a good job because he made it very clear. Mother Teresa couldn't get out of these charges. Well, okay, that now if he gets a hung jury, it's going to look like a huge win.
You know, I thought it was an interesting comparison, and it goes back to what he always says, that this is a witch hunt against him. I mean, people have said from the very beginning, and you pointed this out on CNN, even people who don't like the guy have said this is one of the weakest cases against him. And it was shocking that Alvin Bragg even brought the case in the first place, because he really had to do, some legal mumbo jumbo to make it happen and turn misdemeanors into indictments and all that stuff. And that's what I think will be interesting. You have two lawyers on the jury. Do they see past all of that? And so to your point, the fact that Trump is trying to say, this is ridiculous, Mother Teresa couldn't get out of this, I think was, people laugh at some of the things he says, but it goes back to the fact that this is a weak case. And was the defense able to prove that clearly enough? One of the things I think is interesting here, you go back and look at what this jury is really looking at the end of the day. No one's talking about Stormy Daniels right now. And that's one of the things that the prosecution really tried to hammer down for such a long time. It really came down to the crux of Michael Cohen, and is he a liar or not? And so I just think that it's a great point that Trump made, that Mother Teresa couldn't win. But at the end of the day, it goes to me this. I think it's nice that he stopped saying witch hunt, because I think people are tired of hearing that. So I think it was smart that he shifted gears a little bit and compared it to somebody else who obviously has a clean slate, couldn't even win.
All right, I don't mean to interrupt this conversation. I want to tell you about my friend Leo Grillo at Delta Rescue. You guys know that I've rescued 3 dogs. Leo Grillo has done a lot more than that. He's rescued dogs, cats, horses, all sorts of things, and created not a shelter, but a sanctuary for life. Check out deltarescue.org. Look at the videos and you'll see what I'm talking about. I can't do it justice. the work that he's done, the mission that he has fulfilled by taking care of these dogs and animals, horses, all sorts of that need nutritional care, veterinary care. The thing about Delta Rescue, though, is this isn't some good government program out of Washington. Nope. Leo has done this all on his own from the generous donations of people like you and me. $50, $100, $1,000. If you're an animal lover, please go to deltarescue.org, make a contribution so that this work can continue. But also, please go to the estate planning gift guide that's there on the website when you're checking out the videos. After you make a contribution, think about whether you could add Delta Rescue to your estate. Make it part of your legacy so that the mission endures for decades. deltarescue.org has it all. Check out the estate planning kit. Larry, the thing that's so interesting to me is to Lyndsey's point, like the expectation, like he's trying to salt the field here because the only people that really matter are the jury, but he's trying to make sure that everyone understands that this is ridiculous, right? Again, I don't mean to do it twice, but on C-SPAN this morning, some woman called up and said, he's done all this stuff with election interference. And I said, really? Where's that charge? And she was like, well, I said, no. It's not, they never actually charged him with that. And that's the problem that I think most Americans have, is that if you're going to be convicted of a crime, you need to actually know what it is. And if it's election interference, that's great. Then Trump made this point this morning. Then why did the FEC pass? Why did the DOJ pass? Why did the Southern District of New York pass? Why did Alvin Bragg's predecessor, Cy Vance, pass? Why did Alvin Bragg, as Lyndsey points out, pass initially? Because there's nothing there and it's a federal law and this is a state court.
Right. Yeah. And unlike in the past, I think not only is he doing a good job of resetting the expectations on this, but he's also got allies in the media, or conservative media, and surrogates making that case for him too. People with really good legal credentials who are echoing this. So I think that the message is getting out there. The Mother Teresa line is great. I had suggested that he would say something like, with these jury instructions, they'd find Sean Spicer guilty of being a 6'8" power forward in the NBA. I think that works better. It's a better visual. Yeah. But the Mother Teresa thing is good too, I think. God bless that.
Look, the Celtics are going to the finals. That was a 4-0 sweep in the Eastern Conference. I'm just saying. Anyway, I'm not going to get Lyndsey's down there in Dallas now.
I've seen your two-handed set shot, and you are a dream, my friend, an absolute dream.
Let me ask you guys this. Go ahead.
I'd like it noted for the record that I will never come on your show and take a shot at you like that. Listen, I
find it offensive that a mentee does that. The time and effort I put into helping young Larry, and now he does this. But that's because we're colleagues, Steve. We were colleagues.
Yeah,
Larry is more of like a
Steve
student.
Would never come on your show and take shots like that. But the texts he sent me are hilarious, I gotta say.
That's right. I do it behind your back. I have a dignity.
That's very
in true DC fashion. Yes.
I wouldn't do it in front of you. I would do it behind you. Right. I want to ask you guys a question that I've been obsessed with all week because I'm starting to evolve on this. And I thought I had a pretty solid argument about not allowing cameras in the courtroom. I've heard from Alan Dershowitz. I've heard from Mike Davis. Everybody seems to say, look, cameras in the courtroom allow us, the American people, to see something that we don't have to have through the filter of CNN's left-wing analysis. And I'm coming to the conclusion that maybe it is a good idea to have these. But I want to get your take, all three of you. Steve, do you believe that we should have cameras in the courtroom so we could actually see this play out?
Oh, 100%. I mean, listen, this isn't the 1800s. We don't have lawyers and judges wearing wigs any longer. It's a digital age. Transparency is key. Speaking of transparency, I believe it was Justice Brandeis, one of the Supreme Court justices, who said that, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Yeah.
We should have sunlight. We should have full transparency into what's going on in that courtroom. And I realize there are risks to that, and people then grandstand for cameras. I mean, so I get that there, it's not without ramifications and fallout. But on the whole, if we net it out, I think it would be very instructive and edifying for the American people to actually see what's happening in courtrooms. And part of that, by the way, I mentioned before that my polling tells me that it is problematic if he's convicted. One of the reasons is because Americans still have really high regard for the justice system in the United States. Now, I think that regard is misplaced, especially in some of these deeply corrupt blue jurisdictions like New York City. They should not have high regard for the judicial system. If we put a camera on it, I think that view would probably change very quickly, and they would realize just how corrupted and manipulated the court systems and the prosecutors are, especially in places like New York and Chicago and Fulton County, Georgia.
Lyndsey, cameras, yay or nay?
I think yes. I mean, this is very archaic to Steve's point. We're in the 21st century. And I think actually New York is one of the only states, and maybe Louisiana, there's only like 2 states that have this rule. Obviously, it's a federal, but not a state rule. And so it does seem very, old school. And it's better to have transparency, especially in a case like this that is unprecedented. And if you want the American people to feel like there's a fair shot, they need to see what's going on there. We can't just have reporters telling us what they're hearing from another room that they're seeing from a camera what's going on, that Judge Marchand actually allowed. So it feels, the American people aren't going to feel like they really understand what's going on if they couldn't see it. I think it's a mess.
I'm coming over. Okay, so you mentioned the 21st century. Steve mentioned wigs. So let's go to somebody who understands old school legacy stuff. Larry, you're in terrestrial radio. You understand the 1800s and things like that. Where do you come down on this?
Hey, my signal will still be going when the zombie apocalypse hits. Okay, so don't mock. I always want to lean toward transparency, but with caution, because listen, I lived in LA during the OJ trial. I saw what happened when the judge even started playing to the camera, in addition to the attorneys grandstanding to the camera. On things like this trial is not just about those 12 jurors. This is about public perception. When you get everybody then starting to play to the camera and play to the audience, it's nonstop coverage, 24/7. Other stories that demand attention get lost in the ether. It's not always the best thing when it's a politicized trial. But yes, push comes to shove. Let's let the American people see, and I trust them with their judgment. Although, I mean, just real fast, Steve keeps talking about how everyone respects the judicial system and how this might have ramifications. Number one, I work in D.C., where Marion Barry got elected after he served time. And secondly, this president and his vice president and his party in 2020 rode the entire summer on the notion that our criminal justice system is irrevocably corrupted and broken and slanted. And it's pretty remarkable now that they're relying on the truth, justice, and the American way of the judicial system to go after Trump when they assured all of us that it was systemically racist and broken in the first place.
That's true. Then again, it's not like they haven't flipped on several issues. Steve, putting on your campaign hat for a second, I got to say, one of the biggest mistakes, the Biden campaign had refrained from commenting, had said that the Trump was getting too much attention. And then they roll out Robert De Niro. I can't believe how honest to God, it was like they woke up and said, hey, let's give the Trump campaign a lifeline and show that this truly is political and bring De Niro out. This was probably one of the biggest mistakes that they could have possibly made from the Biden standpoint.
Totally agreed. And both in substance and optics. And as a communications guy like you, I think this was just a massive error that you could have seen a mile away. It's not just in hindsight that it's an error. And in substance, because they have now inserted themselves officially, in an official way, the Biden campaign into the case. Previously, of course, Biden pretended that this was not of his doing. That was absurd, of course, because Alvin Bragg is a close ally of Joe Biden. And of course, the DOJ cases against Trump are directly under his control. So it was always absurd for him to claim that he's aloof from these prosecutions, but he can't even make that absurd claim anymore. The campaign has directly inserted itself in the process. So that's the substance. And then on the optics, the fact that they sent a really angry old actor in who got in shouting matches with regular citizens, with passerbys and protesters there, was just a mess. I mean, it looked terrible, very, very poorly staged. So I think it was a significant hit. And again, if there is a Trump conviction, a ridiculous sham conviction, it will give some more ammo to the Trump team to argue very genuinely that, look, this was a persecution rather than a legitimate prosecution. It was all about politics, not about any crime.
Yeah. Lyndsey, the thing that's so funny is it's one thing for us to agree that was a bad optics, but Mika Brzezinski was on with the comms director of the Biden campaign. His name's Tyler. He's the guy that's seen over De Niro's shoulder. And she said, quote, it doesn't feel right. I mean, even Mika says that it didn't feel right. And that's when you've lost the crew of Morning Joe, you're screwed.
I guess I have to ask you why you decided to speak there and to have the campaign show up at the courthouse. I don't know. It doesn't feel right to me at all.
We showed up there because the news media has been incessantly posted up there day in and day out for weeks.
The optics were so bad, as Steve pointed out. And at the end of the day, I feel like the Biden campaign is really lost. and flailing. One of the reasons that Joe Biden got elected in 2020 was because he wasn't Trump, and because he posed himself to be a nice guy, and because he campaigned from his basement. But at the end of the day, he has tried to, several times we've seen him do this. He tried to do it in 2022 and now trying to be tough and trying to take a page from Trump's book. It doesn't work for him, even if his surrogates are doing it. And, this guy, it's like you bring somebody that's your same age, 80, I guess a little bit younger than you out there, to try to do your dirty work. It doesn't look great. And the other thing is, back to my point of being misguided and confused, how many times now has Biden come out and said, I'm not going to get involved, I'm not going to comment on that, I'm not going to do anything with it? If they were smart, they would just stick to that and stay out of it. But now it does look it makes it look political. Ultimately, what they're saying, it's not. So it proves that it is.
Yeah. The Trump campaign, Jason Miller and others were like, Exhibit A, here we go. This is exactly what we've been saying. And here it happens. Larry, you mentioned living in LA and trying to make it in theater, et cetera, et cetera. In all honesty, like, I've never thought of Robert De Niro, and probably just because I haven't thought about it, but like, I went from being probably agnostic on Robert De Niro as an actor to now, like, wow, I really don't like you. Does that matter, do you think, in terms of this guy's career?
Well, I mean, listen, he's a great actor, and I don't. Getting involved in politics has never hurt anybody's acting career, as long as they do it from the left, right? You can't be liberal enough in Hollywood, so now he's not going to hurt. He's not going to get hurt by this. I'm only sorry that Alec Baldwin wasn't available that day to go out on behalf of Biden.
He probably punched somebody in the face somewhere on the way.
Exactly. That probably wouldn't have been the best look for him, considering he's facing manslaughter charges.
All right, I don't mean to interrupt this conversation once again, but you guys have heard me talk about the weather happening here in D.C., the D.C. area, all sorts of thunderstorms, power outages, tornado warnings. I know I'm ready, though, if something were to happen, because I have a Patriot Power Generator 2000X in my house, right? Something's going to happen. I hate to tell you this, whether it's a weather-related instance or an attack on our power grid, you just don't know how long you're going to be out of power for. And all of the things that we rely on for our families, for ourselves, the refrigerator, medical devices, computers, phones, you name it, they all depend on power. And having a Patriot Power Generator 2000X in your home is the key to being ready. Don't wait for disaster to strike. Get ahead of the curve. If not for you, for a neighbor, for a family member that needs you. The cool thing is the Patriot Power Generator, even I can lift it. It's that portable, and it's powered on a solar panel that comes free with it. No gas, no fumes, no noise. You can go literally in your house and power all your devices. Go to 4patriots.com to check it out now. Do not wait for disaster to come to you. Be ready. 4patriots.com/Spicer. I want to switch gears on the court, because I want to go to the Supreme Court for a second. This controversy about Samuel Alito. Lyndsey, I want to start with you, because he wrote this letter in response. Everyone, Alito's been accused, saying that he needs to recuse himself on the January 6th cases, which somehow that this is their tactic all along. They tried to get Clarence Thomas out. They couldn't figure it, so they're like, we're going to go to Alito now. Alito responds yesterday saying, I'm not going to recuse myself, in a letter that he sends to Dick Durbin, senator from Illinois, and lays out his case. And the case is basically like, hey, look, my wife is the flyer of flags in our house. I didn't agree with her. She didn't know what it was about. And the media is now trying to make the case that Alito's, quote, throwing his wife under the bus. In your opinion, is Alito explaining the circumstance or throwing his wife to the wolves?
Well, I don't know what their relationship is like. Hopefully it's
what
pretty
it is
good.
now versus what it was, maybe two different things.
Exactly. I thought that his explanation was well said or well written, but I did feel bad for his wife. Obviously, or hopefully, they'd had a conversation about it. I think it's great when you can have a marriage that doesn't have to be, one group think. I think that's great, and can have different viewpoints. It did seem like a lot of leaning on the wife. I will say that.
But how do you explain?
Even if that's the truth.
Right.
Yeah, how do you explain that if that's the truth? And that's what I thought. Wow, maybe this really is the case. And you know what? Oftentimes, he's a busy guy. If his wife loves flags and stuff like that, I thought it was a great explanation. But again, I did feel bad for the wife, because I was like, man, she's taking the brunt of this, but maybe it is her fault if that's the truth. And if that's the explanation, that's what needed to be said. You know, if she's the one who flew the flags and he takes the hit for it, then that would have been lying and he should recuse himself.
Exactly.
But if that's the case, then he has to tell the truth. So it put himself in a really tough position.
But wait,
can
we address the substance here?
I was going to go there next. So yes.
Okay. When you say at fault for what? There is no fault here. There's absolutely nothing wrong with flying a distress flag if you are distressed and if you are angry at your neighbors because they're acting like absolute fiends toward Mrs. Alito, which they certainly were. I mean, if you read the New York Times story, if we can take it at face value, and I think they meant that to put the Alitos in a bad light, what it told me was, oh my gosh, the Washington suburbs are a nasty, horrible place if you happen to be a conservative. It made me so glad that I don't live in Washington, D.C., that I'm in God's country in Tennessee, because people are insane there and they're obsessed with politics and they completely mistreated the Alitos. And as a reaction to that, apparently she put up a distress flag. What's wrong with that?
Right, and also,
what Alito should have said is bug off. None of your business.
But the thing is,
it has nothing to do with my judicial work.
I read it yesterday. The Washington Post, that is accused of sitting on this story, said that when the reporter went to them 3 years ago, Mrs. Alito and Justice Alito explained it exactly as you just laid out. Hey, I was upset because our neighbors were attacking us. We put this flag up. We had no idea that it had anything to do with anything else. It was just a distress signal. And the Washington Post concluded at the time, okay, it sounds like two neighbors are disputing each other over something. Okay. And suddenly now it's like, oh, you know what? We didn't get Thomas, so we got to get Alito. So let's say that actually was something. But the Post admits there was nothing there 3 years ago. It's just now we need to find something to go after Justice Alito, Larry.
Yeah, I know. By the way, isn't your neighborhood very close to the Alito's neighborhood? I'd love for you to tell me some stories about your neighbors.
Yeah, I think we'll leave out my neighbors.
All right, that's probably best. I think both Lyndsey and Sean are right about, Steve, excuse me. Sean is not right about anything. Both Lyndsey and Steve are 100% right about this. There's nothing wrong with flying these flags. In fact, the other flag in question is a historic American Revolution flag designed and commissioned by George Washington before we even had the Declaration of Independence. This entire thing is nonsense. Justice Alito actually should have written a letter to the aptly named Dick Durbin and said, I'll fly whatever flag I want in front of my house. You can bite me. And if you really want to bring this up, go ahead and have the balls to impeach me, which he won't. This entire thing is nonsense. However, I do like the fact that when you read this letter, you get the sense that Justice Alito is like, what am I going to do? My wife is having a fight with the neighbors. They're flying a flag. I don't have time to get bothered with this nonsense. It's my wife's thing. I'm just going to go and watch the game.
But can I just, Steve, here's the thing. We as Republicans and folks on the right constantly go like, oh, God, you know what? Here's my answer. Let's go. Right. Let's go. You want to talk about Alito's wife? You want to talk about Ginny Thomas? We got 4 of you. Let's start going down the list and talking about what their spouses do. Because I guarantee you, it ain't pretty.
And exactly.
I'm tired of this.
When we are excusing and explaining, we are losing, and we are playing on their determined verbal and political battleground. We have to stop doing that. The answer here is, I don't care what you think, and we will fly whatever flag we want to fly. Okay, I mean, that's right. The answer, and it has no bearing on my judicial work. That's the answer. It's just like, for example, when they call us racist, say, oh, okay, great, fine. You think I'm a racist. I'm not going to respond. I'm going to continue to pursue policies that benefit America. Don't take the bait. We constantly take the bait. Now, I understand Alito's not an elected politician, so it's different. And look, he may have his own reasons that he thought it was important to explain himself. But for those of us in the political realm, not the judicial realm, stop explaining yourself. And you're exactly correct. Counterattack. If there's one thing that President Trump has taught us is that President Trump is the greatest counterpuncher since Floyd Mayweather. He is the master of the political counterpunch. Instead of explaining something that needs no explanation, okay, we'll fly the flag we want. Counterpunch immediately and say, do you know what? Do you know how these people act? How these deranged suburban leftist lunatics in Washington, D.C. act? Do you know how much Washington, D.C. abuses you, America? And then turn it around and then list those ways. So that's to me, the right messaging, the right counterpunching for those of us in the political game explicitly.
That's what I think that we're missing. I mean, turn it on their head and say, I mean, this is the issue. I bring this up all the time on the issue of abortion. Why are we not talking about how extreme they are? When it comes to racism, let's talk about some of the things that Joe Biden has said over and over again. Put them on defense. Why do we cede the ground? Lyndsey, the other flag that was flown at his New Jersey beach house that everybody's somehow saying, oh, look, you can find pictures of it on January 6th. Joe Concha posted a picture showing it flying over the San Francisco City Hall. So if unless the Alitos happen to be elected on the city council in San Francisco, which I don't think they are, somehow San Francisco has something to explain for as well. They are literally grasping at straws and saying, oh, here's a flag. It was flown at this particular Republican conservative event. Therefore, it's a symbol of this. I think that there is this sense among Republicans that we have to defend every single thing. If that's what's going to be the case, then let's start saying, okay, here are the flags that you fly.
Well, I think that's a good point. And at the end of the day, I mean, Alito didn't recuse himself, right? So he didn't cede ground. I don't think explaining yourself is a bad thing at the end of the day. And one thing that he put forth very clearly is what you're pointing out, Sean, is just because a flag has taken on a new meaning doesn't mean that's the original meaning of it.
Exactly.
I mean,
think about the "Don't Tread on Me" flag. That means, I mean, there's so much that comes with a lot of that. And it's been, some people fly it for some reason. There are people that fly the American flag that don't have the best intentions. I cannot imagine, if you look at January 6th, there's people running around with American flags. God forbid someone tries to claim that that's an evil symbol now.
Well, I mean, think about the rainbow symbol. That was a symbol of how God would never flood the earth again. And now you've had the LGBTQ community take it on. It's taken on a different meaning now. Flags, symbols take on different meanings. And he's saying, I didn't really know that. You know, there's no way to prove his intention or not. You know, I think he's a strong person for not recusing himself.
Yes.
I will say, to counter some of these points too, I mean, flags do have meanings. And if someone was flying God forbid, a Nazi flag in their yard, we would be mad at them. So I can't say that flags don't matter, whatever. I do think flags matter. And I think that what people put forward in their life does matter. But I mean, you should have the freedom of expression. But at what point, when you are a Supreme Court justice and you're on these cases, I can see why people were mad. So I don't want to act like
but again,
he shouldn't explain himself, but I'm glad he did explain himself, and he had a great explanation, and he didn't recuse himself. But I do think that we can't act like flags don't have meaning. I just think that they weren't the meaning that people tried to say that he had.
Right. And I think there's a difference between a flag that's associated unequivocally with a movement and the upside down American flag, which is a distress signal, right? And saying, yes, I was in distress, I flew this, and someone trying to say and impugn your motives and saying, but this was also going on. That's not fair. I think there's a big difference. And that's the thing, is that both of them said, we didn't even know that. And I mean, God forbid, I wouldn't have never associated it with Stop the Steal or something like that. This is the left looking for problems. This is the difference. I think I get your point. And if this was a Nazi flag, then I would say I get it. But this is not in any way, shape, or form. You have to literally go looking for the bad motive. Larry?
Right, but Sean, I think this is important too. We also can't cede this ground. By the way, the upside down flag is not a symbol of January 6th. That's just invented. That's invented. So don't cede that foundation. It's not true. They made it up. Okay. Literally. There's all kinds of ways you can prove this, by doing Google searches, for example, of January 6th and Stop the Steal. And it is not. Now, was there a flag in the crowd that was upside down? Perhaps, right? Among tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people total that were there that day. I don't mean at the riot part, but I mean at the demonstration part of January 6th. But this is concocted. It's invented. And here's the problem with saying, of course, we should explain ourselves. We should, if we lived in a bygone era, okay, if the era of the 1980s and previously, where there was a loyal opposition that loved this country and we just disagreed on some of the particulars. The opposition we face right now, the 2020s Democrats, these are Marxists. These are actual committed radical Marxists who are trying to destroy the United States. And they do not have good motives, and they are not patriots. And so we should never assume that their intentions are pure or that their intentions are even reasonable, because they are not, right? And so because of that, we should not put ourselves in a situation where we are constantly answering to them and explaining to them and excusing ourselves for their ridiculous accusations and smears, particularly when they have totally out of whole cloth invented the idea that this propaganda item, this propaganda narrative, that the upside down flag is a symbol of January 6th when it just is not.
Correct.
Yeah. Sean, we have sitting congresswomen as we speak flying the Palestinian flag out in front of their office. That flag is being used. It's basically a modern day Nazi flag. It's anti-Semitic and it is waved in celebration of the slaughter of innocent Israelis. They were flying Hamas flags at some of these protests, and members of Congress, not obscure members of Congress, superstar squad members of Congress were celebrating those very same Hamas supporting protesters flying terrorist flags. So spare me all of the hand wringing over the flag, an American flag in this question. They should take a cue from Andrew Breitbart and quote him and say, apologize for what? But if I could flow one more little idea here,
that's what you're good at.
The whole crux of this, Sean, has to do with wanting Alito and Thomas, for other reasons, to recuse themselves from the January 6th decision. Can I just propose, in a very same way we had with the Dobbs decision, we know, or somebody knows, what the decision is on President Trump's immunity. I think, based on the questioning, the Supreme Court is going to grant a certain level of immunity to Donald Trump in the case of the January 6th riot. And I think somebody at the Supreme Court, like with the Dobbs decision, has leaked that quietly, privately. And I think that's why the New York Times and the Washington Post are moving this direction. Not because they think Alito's going to recuse himself, but when the decision comes down, they're all going to scream and say, see, they were all in on it. They were all in on it. And I think they already know where the Supreme Court is moving. And I think they're just setting everybody up for the decision that should come in about 3.5 weeks.
I don't know who gave you that idea, but it's really good. And so I know
Are you
someone
saying
must
I could not come up with a really good idea by myself?
Yeah,
this is
actually making
the most hostile, hateful program I've ever been on, Sean.
All right. But actually, I think this is the whole point. These guys are trying to, they understand that more's coming down the pike, and this was just getting the camel's nose under the tent.
This is laying the groundwork.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. We have time. I want to go around the horn and get your weekly winners and losers. Steve, I'll start with you. Give me your winners and give me your losers.
Sure. Well, let me please start with the loser. That's Judge Merchan. Because of those jury instructions, he is just an absolutely politicized, corrupt hack pretending that he's a judge. Just because you put that robe on doesn't mean that you actually care about justice. My winner of the week, I'm going to go to the world of sports, but it's related to criminal law. Scotty Scheffler, winner of the week. He's an amazing person. He's one of the most laudable and respectable sports stars in America. He was caught up in a ridiculous situation that was nothing more than a misunderstanding. The charges, thankfully, were dropped. And I think Scotty Scheffler is somebody who all of us who have kids who are athletes, we want them to be the kinds of people and the kinds of athlete that Scotty Scheffler is. So he's my winner of the week.
That's a good call. I think it's unbelievable the way that he has taken this, and despite the smears to him, now that the body camera's coming out and showing that he is saying, I just want to move on. I would be really pissed if I'm him, but that's because I'm Irish. Lyndsey, who do you have?
Well, I like Steve Cortes even better now because he took my winner. It was Scotty Scheffler. I actually posted about it yesterday. His response on Instagram was unbelievable. And, I put this up. It was a class act. And I think it just goes to show what he's been trying to say all along. This was a huge misunderstanding. I actually have an inside scoop at the PGA who was telling me what actually really went on. And poor guy, every single player was told to do what he did. And they got through. They got into the course, but for some reason he got stopped. And so, he didn't go and say, I was right, all this stuff. He was so kind. And then post yesterday about the death, that's why there was the traffic, because there was a huge accident. And what a class act guy, just to talk about what really matters, life. I would say my loser of the week is Nikki Haley. I think she's trying to make herself relevant again, and she's not delivering on it. Obviously, coming out, endorsing Trump, the timing's really poor for me. It doesn't make sense unless she's trying to be a VP candidate, which I don't think Trump will do. And then also, I think trying to go over to Israel. And again, just the timing of her action seems very odd to me, and I don't think it's delivering what she wants.
Very interesting take. Larry?
My loser of the week has got to be Robert De Niro. That act in the middle of the street in Manhattan was embarrassing. Forget about it, Bobby. Real mobsters don't wear COVID face masks in the middle of a beautiful day. It was an embarrassment. And for my winner, I'm going to stick with sports, but in a different angle. I'm in Scranton, Pennsylvania right now because last night I helped kick off Independent Women's Forum bus tour. It's going to go all around the country, featuring over a dozen incredibly courageous female athletes and coaches trying to save Title IX and bring it back to what it's supposed to be, defining women's sports for biological women. Paula Scanlon, Riley Gaines, Martina Navratilova is going to join the tour. Wow. And the incredible Betsy DeVos was there as well. She's a huge leader on this effort as well. And the Independent Women's Forum is doing a great job organizing it.
Wow, that is phenomenal. I did not know that Martina, I knew that she had spoken out about this before, but the idea
she's going to be on the bus tour at some of the stops. She wasn't there in Scranton last night, here in Scranton, but she's going to be on the tour.
All right, I want to bring up my loser of the week. I agree, General. I'm with all of you on your other ones. De Niro was at my list, but then this gentleman went viral, and I got to give it to him.
Mr. Harris, are you driving? He was just driving, and he didn't have a license. I don't even know why he would do that. So defendant's bond is revoked in this matter. Defendant is to turn himself into the Washington County Jail by 6 p.m. today. Failure to turn himself in will result in a bench warrant with no bond.
That's real justice. I'm going to give my winner of the week for the first time ever to someone on the show. Mr. Steve Cortes, I've talked about how important the border is, and you went out and delivered and told a great, great story about the challenges and the dangers that are happening on our southern border, and I commend you for that. And I hope everybody takes the time to watch this because it is needed. And I get so upset every week when I see Republicans moving away from this issue and not keeping their foot on the gas on this. So I appreciate that, guys.
I'm honored. Thank you.
Well,
I heard about that documentary on C-SPAN.
Yeah, I'll send you the bill. And by the way, if you're looking for Larry, I want to show you how you can find him. You can go on one of these radios, and if you wait, hold on, let me put the antenna up. You can find him. Hold on, I got to give that back to my grandparents. But anyway.
They're big fans of mine, by the way.
Yeah. Anyway, I appreciate you guys being with us. Thank you. We're going to continue to keep an eye on this jury, and we'll go live if needs be to give you a breakdown of the decision. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back here tomorrow. As I said, Carrie Lake is going to be here. And then John McGuire from Virginia just got endorsed by Trump over the sitting congressman who's the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. Why? He's going to tell us tomorrow. Tune in then. We'll see you back here. So subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, and wherever Larry O'Connor is found. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.